Well, you want to do attitude right now.
Yeah. What's up, everybody? Welcome to CFP Talks. As always, I am here with the most handsome co-host in the game, Mr. David Fuchs. So,
Yeah, wearing the same thing as last week.
yeah, nobody knows, man. We record whatever we want, Maybe we just recorded everything in one day. His hair is tight, his beard is tight. I've been running into something that I really wanted to talk about today, which is um, the most underestimated part of this exam. Um, because I think when anybody thinks about the CFP, you start going in by, I got to learn X, I got to learn Y, I got to repeat it, I got to do my flashcards, I got to go into the Q bank, I got to get myself prepared in this way, 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 and I got to do all these items and I got to check them off the list. One thing that I think we seldom talk about throughout the process is your attitude. We've touched on it in different episodes, but I really want to talk about setting yourself up for success. Now, if you were, and I want you to think about it this way. If you were, if this was your client, if you were your own client, and if you're a parent, if this is your kid, if your kid was getting ready for CFP, and how would you treat that process if you were in charge of managing that process for them? Okay. And I guarantee that all of us, the way that we treat our clients, the way that we treat our children, we would set them up for success. Right. We wouldn't let them do too much in one day. We'd probably be on top of them that if they're not doing what they need to be doing on a Tuesday, we'd be like, hey, did you do your homework? Hey, did you do this? Hey, did you do that? And if they're getting frustrated or upset, we'd be like, take it easy. It takes time, right? The same things that we would tell our children. It takes time to learn something. You got to go slow. You can't rush. You got to take your time. You got to plan. Did you plan for this today? Did you go to bed late last night? Well, if you go to bed late last night, you're not going to have energy the next day. This is how we learn. And so the way that we naturally treat our children or the way that we would reprimand our clients are rarely the way that we talk to ourselves. And this has a really big impact on it because your self-talk during your studying is really big. And if you're going in going, I'm a moron, I'm an idiot, fucking stupid, I'm never going to get this. We've just made the CFP is hard enough on its own. That attitude takes you right out the game because something that might have taken you just a little bit more effort to learn ends up becoming just a huge Herculean effort.
Mhm.
And I think this is one of the things that there's a lot of times that people get discouraged because I read it in the book and I don't get it. Would you tell your kid the same thing? If you had a client and they were studying for the CFP and they're like, I don't get some of these very complicated, complex topics on the first time. Right? It's like, if you're teaching a kid how to hit a baseball, you get mad that they can't hit the ball 400 feet their second time there. Now, again, you always hear these freak stories of, I took this kid out, Aaron Judge, the third time he was on the baseball field, he crushed a 250-foot home run. You're like, oh my God. Hey, yeah, there's a freak, there's somebody with freak genetics everywhere. And there's some people who can do those things, but, they're this much of the population. For all of us, this attitude is a really important thing because I'm sure you know this too, David. A lot of people, even just at work, their attitude ends up pushing them in their career much further than somebody who's like really, really smart. And we've actually talked about one of these people. We're like, man, if they're really smart and if their attitude changed a bit, they would be an absolute rock star.
Right.
And I think this is a really hard thing to kind of wrap your head around. It's like, well, I'm busting my hump. I'm doing everything I can. I know. And that's kind of a tough thing. And you've seen it, you saw it in your own cohort. That attitude plays a big role. Like you had one person
Mhm.
there who was all business. You were kind of in the middle. You were relaxed, but you were still business, which was it was a good. Like you had this
Yeah.
good mix of it, and then you had somebody who was like just like kind of a little bit ahead in the clouds and a little bit like taking himself out of the equation by just like quitting every time he didn't get something the first time.
Uh-huh.
This is something that it's tough because the CFP is a tough process. Like, and especially when you're learning these complex topics from the ground up, it could be really tough to stay positive. Like, it's easy to say, just be positive, you'll get it. Like, I get that, but this attitude thing is a really important thing because it's almost like being open and coachable is more important than being some mega genius.
Mhm.
And I think this is kind of, and that was something hard for me as a tutor because initially I'm like, I want to work with smart people. And then sometimes I realize like a smart person with a bad attitude is much harder to teach than somebody who's not as academically inclined with a good attitude because they would just listen to the coaching and do the practice,
Exactly.
and I really I want to encourage you guys who are watching that when you're going through this process, you know, and you're planning it out and you're going through it the first time, Dave, you remember this, right? You sign up for the exam. It's like rose-colored glasses. It's gonna be great.
Mhm.
And I'm gonna get these letters, baby. I'm gonna be so smart.
Right.
I'm gonna
Right.
solve all these client problems. And then you actually start the process here, like this is a lot harder than I thought. Immediately you're knocked down two pegs. Right. And that's the thing that you have to realize is that by being realistic about the exam and knowing you're going to struggle through the process makes the process easier.
That's what I said last or 2 weeks ago. I think it was either last week or 2 weeks ago. When we were talking about how to get over like discouragement and when you're burnt out and what you can do. And like one of the things that I would say is that just know it's gonna happen. Just know you're gonna go through and just know it's gonna be a part of the process. And yeah, that doesn't mean it's not gonna suck when you're doing it. But if you know what's gonna happen and you know it's like if you know to expect it, you're like, all right, this is what they were talking about when they said you're going to get discouraged, you're going to get burnt out, et cetera, et cetera. It makes it a little bit more manageable to deal with that part of the process.
Mm. Yeah, and I think also one of the reasons that everybody gets discouraged is because of expectations, right? Like this came up with Giannis, right? When the Bucks got knocked out in the first round of the playoffs, and he's like, "Is the season a failure?" And I was like, "Oh my god!" He's like, "Michael Jordan played in the NBA for 15 seasons or 14 seasons. He won 6 championships, where the other 8 seasons a failure." And again, this depends on who you ask. Like if you look at that, and again, relative to the thought of them winning a championship, it was absolutely a failure. Relative to them making a deep playoff runs, it was a failure. Relative to the fact that they had a great season, they won 58 games or so, had a great successful season. Giannis was third in the MVP. Like that's a huge success. Now, again, when you go into studying, I think that the expectation is I'm going to read it once and I'm going to understand it. Or maybe I'm going to do it twice. And even though when you say it out loud, it sounds nuts, you're like, that's not what I am expecting. It's kind of what you're expecting. It's like you're not expecting
Yeah.
it to be that hard to learn. You're not expecting it to be frustrating. You're not expecting it to be an uphill battle. And I think that element of like, holy shit, like this is so much harder than I expected ends up being one of the most discouraging parts. So where's
Yeah.
the level of credit? You know, where's the level of credit that you give it? What do you think?
The level of credit that you give what?
The exam.
The
Where you make the exam where you know that it's going to be tough, but it's you can't necessarily get in your head that hard where it's too much of a hurdle to jump.
what was this, like 1 out of 10?
Like where do you go? Like where do you put it? Like how do you manage that? Like, when I'm thinking about it, I'm like, I knew the CFA was going to be tough and I gave it its credit, but I never wanted to give it so much credit that it felt overwhelming that I couldn't pass the test.
Well, no, exactly. You
I
want
didn't
to
want to
make
be
it where it's like,
scared of it.
no, exactly. You don't want to make it, you don't want to put it on a pedestal where it's
Right.
like, oh, this thing is impossible to pass, and there's pretty much no way I'm going to pass it. Because if that's your attitude, then you're not going to fucking pass it. Because then you're telling yourself you're not going to pass it, you're not going to pass it. But if you go in saying, you know what, this is a challenge, it's going to be a tough process, I'm going to need to push myself probably harder mentally than I've pushed myself to get the results that I want, but it's doable because thousands of people have done it.
Hmm.
And probably a lot of people that are not as smart as me. And I'm saying me plurally, not me personally.
Right.
But 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 it's doable. That's the right balance. You have to say this is a challenge, but it is doable and it is completely worth it. And I am definitely smart enough to do it. I just need to push myself and go outside of my comfort zone. And again, it's going to be tough. You're going to get pissed off. You're going to get burnt out at times. And there's going to be times where you are going to think to yourself, there's no way that I am going to pass this, because me personally, I thought that every single day that I was studying for the exam.
Yeah.
But that didn't stop me from coming every single day and putting 100% in to try and pass this thing.
Yeah. So
So that's what
I think the reality of it is that you got to go in it with a champion's mindset. I respect my opponent. I don't
right.
underestimate it. I'm going to
But
give
I
it,
believe I can win.
but I know that I can do it. Exactly.
Yeah,
I
exactly.
know that my level of preparedness is going to be better than what the exam will give me. And because I'm going to be that prepared is how I'm going to get there.
Yeah. And honestly, if the exam was so easy and you didn't have to put in that, go out of your comfort zone and put in that effort to pass it, to be honest with you, it's not an exam that's worth, it wouldn't be as rewarding at the end. Anyone can go out and pass any exam, like,
Right.
but this is something that is worth it.
Right.
And that's why it's tough.
So you got to like again like that chance. I know that I'm going to go and I'm going to prepare and I'm not going to underestimate, but I'm not going to overestimate. I'm going to respect.
Not exactly, exactly. That's it.
So attitude, set those expectations appropriately. You got to respect the exam, but know that with enough preparation, and that means more for some and less for others, but go in with the attitude of, if I have to prep more on one thing, that doesn't mean that I'm not smart. It doesn't mean that I'm an idiot. It doesn't mean that I should know this. You are where you are, and the best thing that you can do is get yourself prepared, and setting yourself up with success means showing up every day, which doesn't mean every day is 100%. It means some days are 100, some days are 30, and some days are 50, and some days are 70, and you can't necessarily judge the process by your good days or your bad days. It's got to be judged by the middle. So that's the attitude that we want to go in this exam with. And as always, if you have questions, please reach out to me and David. You can DM us on LinkedIn, and we will see you guys very soon. Have a great evening.